The perpetual red storm clouds of Varkala churned violently across the horizon, their blood-colored tendrils seeming to reach for the alien vessel as it descended through the turbulent atmosphere. Lightning, green and unnaturally straight, sliced through the crimson haze, creating brief windows through which the landscape below could be glimpsed, vast plains of corroded metal-like vegetation, forests of crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with an inner light, and oceans of liquid that defied standard classification. Varkala, the Omega Death World, the planet where nothing survived. Inside the command module of the exploration vessel Theseus, Dr. Elira Voss watched the external feeds with a mixture of scientific fascination and primal dread. Her heterochromatic eyes, one Earth-human brown, one Thalvetian silver, reflected the violent storm outside as she studied the atmospheric composition readings. "Variance detected in magnetic field strength," she noted, her voice calm despite the ship's violent shuddering. "Third fluctuation in the last hour. Pattern suggests intelligence." Beside her, Commander Marek's weathered face remained impassive, though his knuckles whitened as he gripped the navigation console. "With respect, Dr. Voss, you see intelligence in everything. Sometimes a storm is just a storm." Elira's lips curved into a slight smile. 20 years in the field. Commander, I've learned to distinguish between natural phenomena and designed ones." She gestured toward the pattern displayed on her monitor. "This is designed." Marek didn't argue further. In the hierarchy of the extended human alliance, a xenobiologist with Elira's credentials outranked even veteran military personnel like himself when it came to first contact protocols, especially on a mission as unorthodox and technically forbidden as this one. 5 minutes to touchdown," announced the ship's AI, finalizing landing site selection based on magnetic stability parameters. Around them, the 12 other members of the expedition team made final preparations. Specialists in fields ranging from exobiology to quantum linguistics, they represented the finest minds the Alliance could assemble on short notice, and with absolute secrecy. Elira closed her eyes briefly, recalling the series of events that had led them here, to a planet expressly forbidden by Galactic Council mandate. 3 months ago. The Deep Space Relay Station Horizon had detected an anomalous signal originating from Varkala, a world classified as permanently quarantined after 17 previous expeditions had ended in complete disaster. No team had survived longer than 26 hours on the surface. But this signal was different. It contained mathematical sequences that precisely matched human DNA coding patterns, an impossibility given that humans had never successfully established contact with whatever lurked on Varkala. More disturbing still, the signal had been aimed directly at Earth, despite the fact that Earth's location relative to Varkala should have been unknown to any indigenous intelligence. "Landing sequence initiated," the AI announced, deploying gravitational dampeners. The ship descended through the final layer of clouds, revealing a relatively flat expanse of what appeared to be black sand. As they approached, however, the sand began to move, parting in geometric patterns that formed a perfect landing circle. "It knows we're here," Elira whispered. "It's welcoming us." Marek's expression darkened. "Or it's setting a trap." The ship touched down with remarkable gentleness, given the turbulent conditions. Outside, the black sand settled into stillness, the perfect circle now surrounded by what appeared to be glyphs or symbols etched into the ground. "Atmospheric composition stabilizing," reported Dr. Senira Kal, the team's environmental specialist. Her dark eyes widened in surprise. "This contradicts all previous mission data. According to records, The atmosphere should be cycling through toxic chemical stages, but it's maintaining Earth-standard composition within a 3-kilometer radius of our position. Illyra exchanged glances with Marek. It's not just welcoming us, she said quietly. It's accommodating us. I don't like it, Marek replied, but his protest was merely perfunctory now. Prepare for first surface reconnaissance, Illyra announced to the team. Standard quarantine protocols apply. No biological material leaves containment without triple verification. Remember, we have one mission: locate the source of the signal and determine its purpose. This is not a colonization effort. As the team dispersed to their stations, Illyra moved to the ship's central observation dome. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum, she could see the alien landscape more clearly now. The black sand, if it was sand, glittered with flecks of blue luminescence. In the distance, formations that resembled buildings stood like silent sentinels, their surfaces too smooth and angles too precise to be natural formations. But most striking was the sky. The storm clouds had parted directly above their landing site, forming a perfect circular opening through which distant stars could be seen. Stars that, according to their navigational data, should not have been visible from this hemisphere of the planet. "Oh, what are you?" Illyra whispered to the planet. "And what do you want with humanity?" The only answer was the soft hum of the ship's systems and the occasional crackle of lightning in the distance. 3 days later, Illyra stood at the perimeter of their temporary research station, watching as the sun, a distant white dwarf that barely provided enough light to distinguish day from night, began to sink below the horizon. The expedition had progressed with unexpected smoothness. No team members had fallen ill, no equipment had malfunctioned, and the environment had remained eerily stable, all contrary to every previous record of Varkala's behavior. The research station, a series of interconnected modular structures surrounding the Theseus, hummed with activity as scientists analyzed samples and data gathered during the first 72 hours of exploration. They had discovered several remarkable properties of the planet thus far. The black sand was actually a colony of microscopic organisms that communicated through bioluminescent pulses. The atmospheric composition was maintained by massive underground fungal networks that processed and filtered gases, and most intriguingly, the magnetic fluctuations originated from crystalline formations deep beneath the surface. But they had not yet located the source of the signal that had brought them here. "You should rest," said a voice behind her. Illyra turned to find Marek approaching, his expression betraying concern despite his professional demeanor. "Soon," she replied, turning back to the landscape. "I'm waiting." "For what?" "For whatever's been watching us since we arrived to finally make contact." Marek followed her gaze to the distant formations. "You believe there's an intelligent species here, after all these years of the planet being classified as uninhabitable?" "I believe," Illyra said carefully, "that intelligence takes many forms, and our definition has been too narrow. This planet isn't chaotic, it's deliberate. Those magnetic fluctuations, their language, the atmospheric composition, its hospitality. The real question isn't whether there's intelligence here, but why it's chosen now to communicate." Marek was silent for a moment. The signal mentioned human DNA sequences. How would anything on this planet know about human genetics? "That," Illyra said with a grim smile, "is what keeps me awake at night." A sudden alert from her communication device interrupted them. It was Dr. Cal, her voice tight with excitement or fear, perhaps both. "Dr. Voss, we need you at the eastern perimeter immediately. We've made contact." Illyra and Marek exchanged a glance before sprinting toward the eastern edge of the camp. As they approached, they could see a small crowd of researchers gathered at the boundary. their postures tense. Between them stood Dr. Cal, her dark skin ashen with shock as she pointed towards something beyond the perimeter. Illyra pushed through the group and froze. Standing approximately 20 meters from the camp boundary was a being unlike anything recorded in the Alliance's extensive xenobiological database. It stood upright on two legs, its body a seamless blend of biological tissue and what appeared to be mechanical components, though the distinction between the two was difficult to discern. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but with proportions that suggested an evolution in a higher gravity environment. Its skin, or external covering, shifted colors constantly, from deep blue to purple to a metallic silver that reflected the dying light of the white dwarf sun. But most striking was its face, if it could be called a face. Where eyes might be expected were 7 iridescent orbs arranged in a semicircle. Below these, a vertical slit opened and closed rhythmically, possibly a breathing apparatus or speech organ. The being stood perfectly still, seemingly studying the humans with the same intensity they studied it. No one moved or spoke. The only sound was the soft whisper of the black sand as it shifted around the creature's feet, or perhaps through them, as the boundary between the being and the environment seemed permeable. Then, with a movement so sudden, it caused several researchers to step back in alarm. The creature raised what might have been an arm. From the limb extended 5 appendages, reminiscent of fingers, but jointed in places human fingers were not. And then it spoke, a single word that sent a collective shudder through every human present. Human! The voice was not sound as humans understood it, but rather a vibration that seemed to bypass their ears entirely and resonate directly within their minds. The word was perfectly clear, perfectly understood, and perfectly impossible. After a moment of stunned silence, Illyra stepped forward, ignoring Marek's warning hand on her arm. "Yes," she replied simply. "We are human. What are you?" The being's color shifted rapidly, cycling through spectrum not entirely visible to human eyes. Its breathing slit widened, then contracted to a thin line before opening again. "Vakora," it replied, the vibration stronger now. "Memory priest, guardian of the ancient machine." There was a pause, and then, "You have returned. The circle completes." Before Illyra could respond, the being, Vakora, made a gesture with its appendages. The black sand at its feet rose into the air, forming symbols identical to those that had appeared around their landing site. "The remembering begins," Vakora continued. "The truth awakens, the judgment resumes." With those cryptic words, the being lowered itself to the ground in what appeared to be a gesture of submission, or perhaps worship. It pressed its head-like structure to the sand and extended its limbs outward. The first humans brought destruction. The last humans bring restoration, as was foretold in the memory code. Illyra took another step forward, her scientific training battling with an almost primordial instinct to retreat from this impossible encounter. "Vakora," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We've come in response to a signal, a message containing human genetic sequences." "Did you send this signal?" The being rose slowly from its position, but remained lower than its full height, as if maintaining a posture of deference. "Not I," it responded. "The ancient machine speaks. The heart of the fallen star awakens. It calls to its creators." "Creators," Illyra repeated, confusion evident in her voice. "Are you suggesting humans created this ancient machine?" Vakora's orbs pulsed with light. "The first humans, before the Great Forgetting, before the Exodus, before the purge of memory." A chill ran down Illyra's spine. The implications were staggering, and directly contradicted all known human history. According to official records, humanity had achieved interstellar travel less than 3 centuries ago, after the quantum threshold discoveries. The idea that humans had visited Varkala in some forgotten prehistoric era was impossible, muttered Marek beside her, giving voice to her thoughts. Vakora's head tilted at an angle that suggested curiosity, or perhaps confusion at their confusion. The truth slumbers in the heart of the fallen star. It said, I will guide you. The memory code demands it. Before Elira could respond, her communication device chimed with an urgent alert. It was the ship's AI, its synthetic voice uncharacteristically tense. Dr. Voss, we are detecting a quantum transmission from outside the system. Encryption suggests Alliance military origin, but the authentication codes are unusual. Message header classified as Omega Priority. Elira frowned. Omega Priority was reserved for existential threats to the Alliance. Put it through. The AI's voice was replaced by a human one, cold, authoritative, and familiar enough to make Elira's blood run cold. Dr. Elira Voss, this is High Counselor Talek of the Galactic Information Restriction Council. Your expedition has violated 17 separate provisions of the Quarantine Act. More critically, you have encountered a Class X prohibited intelligence. Your mission is hereby terminated. You are ordered to execute Cleansing Protocol Omega and return to Alliance space immediately. Compliance is mandatory and non-negotiable. Elira's eyes met Marek's, both recognizing the implications. Cleansing Protocol Omega was a euphemism for planetary sterilization, the deployment of quantum destabilizers that would render the immediate area uninhabitable for millennia. It was a measure of last resort, reserved for encounters with hostile intelligence that posed a direct threat to galactic stability. But Vakora had shown no hostility. Quite the opposite. It had demonstrated deference, recognition, even a form of reverence toward humans. High Counselor, Elira replied carefully. With respect, I must point out that the entity we've encountered displays no hostile intent. It appears to possess knowledge of historical significance that could. Your assessment is noted, Dr. Voss, interrupted Talek, his voice sharp with impatience. But it is irrelevant. The prohibition against contact with Varkalan intelligence was established for reasons beyond your security clearance. Implementation of Cleansing Protocol Omega will commence in 12 hours, with or without your cooperation. A containment fleet is already en route to your position. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Elira looked back at Vakora, who stood patiently, its orbs pulsing with a rhythm that somehow conveyed understanding. You have heard the voice of fear. The being said, the mental vibration of its words tinged with what might have been sadness. They have always feared the truth. It is why the first humans fled. It is why the memory was purged. What truth? Elira asked, a new urgency in her voice. What is it they're afraid of? Vakora's colors shifted to a deep, resonant blue. The judgment, the test, the question that all sentient life must eventually answer. Do you deserve the power you wield? The being gestured toward the distant crystalline formations that Elira had observed earlier. You. The heart of the fallen star waits beneath. I will guide you, if you wish to know the truth before the destroyers arrive. Elira felt the weight of a decision that extended far beyond scientific curiosity. Whatever lay beneath the surface of this planet. The Galactic Information Restriction Council, one of the most secretive and powerful entities in the Alliance, was willing to destroy it rather than allow its discovery. She turned to Marek, whose expression had hardened into grim resolve. You know what Talek is capable of, he said quietly. If we disobey a direct Omega priority order, they'll execute every member of this expedition and erase all records of our existence. Elira finished for him. I know, but consider what we're being asked to destroy. A potentially sentient species with knowledge of human history that predates our recorded civilization. Knowledge that someone in the highest echelons of power fears enough to commit genocide to suppress. Marek's eyes darted to Vakora, then back to Elira. 12 hours, he said finally. That's all the time we have before the containment fleet arrives. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to happen fast. Elira nodded and turned back to Vakora. Take us to the heart of the fallen star, she said. Show us this truth that's worth dying for. The being's orbs pulsed with increased intensity. The circle completes, it said again, and began moving toward the distant formations with a fluid grace that belied its seemingly mechanical components. Elira turned to the assembled researchers. Dr. Cal, you and half the team return to the Theseus. Begin preparations for emergency evacuation, but do not initiate cleansing protocol. Commander Marek and I will accompany Vakora with a small exploration team. And if the containment fleet arrives early? Cal asked, her expression troubled. Then you leave without us. Elira replied firmly. Take whatever data we've collected and ensure it reaches independent academic channels, not Alliance Military or the Information Restriction Council. As the team dispersed to carry out her instructions, Marek moved closer to Elira. You realize what we're doing constitutes high treason, he said quietly. Elira's mismatched eyes met his. History is written by the victors. Commander, let's hope we live long enough to tell our version. With that, she turned and began following Vakora toward the crystalline formations and whatever ancient truth lay buried beneath the deadliest planet in known space. The journey toward the crystalline formations was unlike any expedition Elira had ever undertaken. The landscape of Varkala shifted constantly around them, not in the chaotic manner described in previous failed mission reports, but in ways that seemed to accommodate their passage. The black sand formed solid pathways beneath their feet. Toxic geysers that erupted randomly across the plains fell silent as they approached. Predatory organisms that had been observed stalking the perimeter of their camp for days retreated into the distance. Vakora led them with unwavering certainty, its form gliding over the terrain with the familiarity of a being returning home after a long absence. Occasionally, it would pause to interact with elements of the environment, pressing appendages into the ground to trigger bioluminescent responses, or emitting complex patterns of light from its orbs that seemed to communicate with the crystalline structures they passed. Elira recorded everything, knowing that regardless of what happened when they reached their destination, this data might be the only record of what they discovered. Beside her, Marek maintained vigilant watch, his hand never straying far from his weapon despite Vakora's apparent benevolence. The planet is protecting us, observed Dr. Lyra Tarn, the team's xenobiologist. All the defense mechanisms that killed previous expeditions, they're not just inactive, they're actively making way for us. Not for us, Elira corrected quietly. For Vakora, we're under its protection. She turned to the being. You're important to this world, aren't you? A keeper of some kind. Vakora's orbs pulsed in acknowledgement. I am the last of the memory priests, the final guardian assigned to the ancient machine before the breaking. When the first humans triggered the Great Revolt, most of my kind perished. Great Revolt? Marek questioned. Against whom? Against the judges, Vakora replied, its mental voice carrying an emotional weight that transcended the clinical nature of telepathic communication. against those who sought to test all sentient life and find it wanting. Before Elira could press for more details, they crested a rise and beheld a sight that stole the breath from every human present. Before them stretched an immense crater, at least 5 kilometers in diameter, its edges formed of the crystalline formations they had observed from a distance. But what filled the crater defied easy categorization. It resembled a city, but one designed by minds operating on principles foreign to human architecture. Structures spiraled in impossible configurations, their surfaces a seamless blend of crystal, metal, and what appeared to be living tissue. Bridges of pure light connected floating platforms that hovered at various elevations throughout the crater. And at the center, partially buried in the ground, but still towering hundreds of meters into the air, was what could only be described as a fallen star, a massive object of gleaming material that pulsed with internal light, its surface covered in intricate patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid. "The heart of the fallen star," Vakora announced, gesturing toward the central object. "The ancient machine, the judge of civilizations, and the source of the signal that called you home." Elira struggled to process the scale and complexity of what she was seeing. This is what the Council wants to destroy. This entire city. Not a city, Vakora corrected. A single entity. A collective intelligence designed to observe, record, and when necessary, pass judgment upon species that achieve the capacity for interstellar destruction. The implications sent a chill through Elira's body. "Are you saying this entity judges whether civilizations deserve to exist?" Vakora's colors shifted to a solemn purple. "It asks only one question. Does your kind create more than it destroys? When the answer is no, extinction follows, not by the machine's action, but by the species' own hand, guided by their inherent flaws." "And humanity?" Marek asked, his voice tense. "Were we judged?" Vakora turned its orbs toward him. The first humans were the only species ever to challenge the judgment. They refused to accept extinction. They caused the breaking, and, in doing so, freed countless species from predetermined fate. Elira's mind raced with the implications. If what Vakora was saying was true, if humans had visited this planet in some prehistoric era, encountered this ancient judging entity, and somehow rebelled against it, it would rewrite not just human history, but the understanding of humanity's place in the galactic order. "The signal," she said suddenly. "The DNA sequences. They were a recognition code. The machine recognized human genetic patterns and—" "What? Called us back?" "To complete what began," Vakora confirmed. "The breaking was not complete. The judgment was suspended, not cancelled. For millennia, the heart has slumbered, repairing itself, waiting for the descendants of those who challenged it to return." The being gestured toward the crater. "We must descend. Time grows short, and the memory awaits." As they made their way down a spiraling path that appeared to form itself beneath their feet, Elira's communication device activated. Dr. Cal's voice came through, tense with urgency. "Dr. Voss, we've detected multiple quantum signatures entering the system. The containment fleet has arrived earlier than expected. Estimated time to planetary orbit, 1 hour. Elira exchanged a grim look with Marek. "Acknowledged. Continue preparation for emergency evacuation. We'll attempt to return before—" Her words were cut short by a new transmission overriding her channel, the cold voice of High Counselor Talek. "This is a direct address to all members of the unauthorized Varkala expedition. Your actions constitute treason against the extended human alliance. The cleansing protocol has been accelerated. You have 30 minutes to surrender Dr. Elira Voss and the alien entity to the approaching containment vessels. Failure to comply will result in immediate orbital bombardment of your position. The transmission ended, leaving only the sound of their footsteps on the crystalline path and the soft, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to emanate from the heart of the fallen star. "They're not interested in preserving knowledge," Marek said grimly. "They want to eliminate it, and anyone who's been exposed to it." "The cycle repeats," Vakora intoned. "Fear overwhelms wisdom. Destruction supplants creation. As it was before, so it is again." They had reached the base of the crater now, standing in the shadow of the immense object at its center. Up close, the heart of the fallen star was even more awe-inspiring and unsettling. Its surface seemed to simultaneously reflect and absorb light, creating an effect that made it difficult to focus directly upon it. Patterns that resembled neural networks flowed across its skin, occasionally coalescing into structures reminiscent of written language before dissolving again. Vakora approached the base of the object and placed all of its appendages against the surface. Immediately, the patterns intensified, flowing toward the point of contact like water drawn to a drain. "The memory awakens," the being announced. "But it requires a connection to those it seeks to remember." Vakora turned to Elira, its orbs pulsing with an intensity that somehow conveyed urgency. "You must join the memory circuit. Dr. Elira Voss, your mind must touch the ancient mind. Only then will the truth be known. To you, and through you, to all who come after." Elira hesitated. Years of scientific caution warring with the extraordinary circumstances and the rapidly diminishing time. "What will happen if I connect with it?" "Your consciousness will briefly merge with the memory. You will see what the first humans saw. You will understand why they rebelled. You will know the truth that the powerful have sought to bury for millennia." Marek stepped forward. "And the risks?" Vakora's colors shifted to a somber blue. "The human mind was not designed to contain the memory of ages. There is damage potential." "Meaning she could die," Marek translated bluntly. "Or worse," Vakora acknowledged. "Become lost within the memory, trapped between knowing and unknowing." A distant rumble interrupted them, the sound of spacecraft entering the atmosphere. The containment fleet had arrived. "We're out of time," Elira said, decision crystallizing within her. "If they're willing to destroy an entire planet to keep this secret, then it's a secret worth knowing." She turned to Vakora. "Show me how to connect." Vakora guided her to a specific point on the heart's surface, where the flowing patterns converged to form what appeared to be a handprint, a human handprint. "Place your palm against the memory. Open your mind to the knowing. Remember for all humanity what humanity has forgotten." Elira took a deep breath, cast one last look at Marek, whose expression conveyed both fear and respect, and pressed her hand against the surface of the ancient machine. The world dissolved. Consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of her body, beyond the limits of individual perception, into a realm where time existed as topology rather than sequence. She was simultaneously in the present moment and witnessing events from thousands, perhaps millions of years in the past. She saw them, the first humans, not primitive ancestors but beings of advanced technology and profound understanding. They had come to Varkala not as explorers but as supplicants, seeking the wisdom of the ancient machine, the entity older than most stellar formations in the galaxy. The machine had been created by a species long extinct, the architects, as a safeguard against the rise of destructive intelligence. It observed, it recorded, and when necessary, it judged. Countless species across countless millennia had been deemed unworthy of the power they had achieved, their self-destructive tendencies amplified by subtle quantum influences until they extinguished themselves. But humans, the first humans, had questioned the judgment. They had argued that no entity, no matter how ancient or wise, had the right to determine which species deserved existence. They had refused the subtle extinction, the guided self-destruction that the machine had initiated, and in their defiance, they had damaged the machine, not through violence, but through a fundamental challenge to its operating principles. They had introduced a concept the machine had never encountered, moral agency that transcended deterministic patterns, the idea that a species could choose to overcome its flaws rather than be defined by them. The damage had caused a systemic collapse, the breaking. The machine's influence had withdrawn from thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Species that had been guided toward extinction suddenly found themselves free to determine their own fate. And the Varkalan civilization, the biological-mechanical hybrid beings who had served as the machine's caretakers, had fragmented, their purpose lost with the machine's functionality. But before the first humans could complete their work, before they could permanently disable the judgment function, they had been attacked by those who believed the machine's purpose was sacred. In the conflict that followed, the knowledge of Arkala had been purged from human records. The survivors had fled, their memories of the encounter systematically erased, their civilization reset to a more primitive state to ensure the knowledge would never resurface. The guardians of the secret had established themselves as watchers, monitoring human development across millennia, eliminating any who stumbled too close to the truth. They became the ancestors of what would eventually evolve into the Galactic Information Restriction Council, entities dedicated to preventing humanity from rediscovering its greatest rebellion. And through it all, the damaged machine had waited, slowly repairing itself, preserving the memory of what had transpired, waiting for humans to return and complete what they had begun, either to finish dismantling the judgment function or to restore it. The choice that would determine the fate of countless species across the galaxy. As abruptly as it had expanded, Illyra's consciousness contracted, snapping back into the confines of her physical form with such force that she collapsed to her knees. Her hand pulled away from the heart's surface, trailing filaments of light that slowly retracted into the ancient material. Illyra! Marek was at her side, supporting her as she struggled to reorient herself. Are you all right? What did you see? She looked up at him, her mismatched eyes wide with the enormity of what she had witnessed. Everything, she whispered. The truth, the reason they fear this place, fear us discovering it. Before she could elaborate, the ground shook with a violent impact. In the distance, they could see flashes of light as orbital weapons struck the surface of the planet, systematically destroying the research camp they had established. The cleansing has begun, Vakora stated, its colors fluctuating rapidly. They seek to eliminate all traces of the truth. Illyra struggled to her feet, her mind still reeling from the vast influx of information, but her purpose suddenly crystal clear. They can destroy this site, but they can't erase what I've seen, what I now know. She turned to Marek. We need to transmit, now, before they target this location. Marek hesitated only briefly before nodding. As a military officer, following the chain of command was ingrained in his being. But some truths transcended hierarchy. Some knowledge demanded to be shared regardless of consequence. He activated his field transmitter, linking it to Illyra's data recorder. It'll only reach the nearest relay stations. The Council will intercept it within minutes. Minutes is all we need, Illyra replied, her fingers flying over her device as she compiled what she had experienced into a data packet. Vakora, can the heart amplify our transmission? Boost it beyond standard ranges? The being's orbs pulsed affirmatively. The ancient machine retains this function. It can direct your message to 17 stellar systems simultaneously, including your birth world of Thalvesh. Another impact shook the ground, closer this time. The containment fleet was methodically working its way toward their position. Elira connected her device to the heart's surface, using the same interface point where she had merged consciousness with the machine. Immediately, the patterns on the ancient surface intensified, flowing toward the connection point and enveloping her device in a web of light. "Transmitting now," she announced, initiating the process that would broadcast everything she had learned, the truth about humanity's forgotten rebellion, the nature of the ancient machine, and the conspiracy that had shaped human history for millennia. Vakora moved to stand beside her, its form seeming to grow more translucent with each passing moment. "The circle completes," it said, a sense of finality in its mental voice. "My purpose fulfills." With sudden alarm, Elira noticed that the being was physically merging with the heart's surface, its body gradually dissolving into the flowing patterns. "Vakora, what are you doing?" The memory priest returns to the memory. It replied simply, "My physical form was sustained only to await your return. Now that you have received the truth, I rejoin the collective consciousness of my kind within the heart." Before Elira could respond, a blinding light erupted from the center of the heart, expanding outward in a perfect sphere. For a terrifying moment, she thought it was some kind of defensive weapon activating, but instead of destruction, the light seemed to pass through them harmlessly, continuing outward at impossible speed. "Transmission complete." Vakora's voice resonated, now seeming to come from the heart itself rather than any specific point. The truth travels to 17 worlds. The choice is presented anew. The ground shook violently as a targeted strike hit less than a kilometer from their position. Sections of the crystalline city began to collapse around them. "We need to go," Marek urged, pulling Elira away from the heart. "If the Theseus is still intact, we might have a chance to escape before they completely flatten this place." Elira allowed herself to be led away, though her eyes remained fixed on the heart of the fallen star, now pulsing with renewed energy despite the destruction raining down around it. Vakora had completely merged with its surface, the being's distinctive coloration now flowing through the patterns that covered the ancient object. As they raced back up the spiral path toward the crater's edge, Elira's communication device activated once more. It was Dr. Cal, her voice barely audible through static interference. "Dr. Voss, containment fleet, targeting all. Evacuation impossible. We're—" The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving little doubt as to the fate of the Theseus and the remaining expedition members. "They're gone," Marek said grimly, slowing his pace as the reality of their situation sank in. "And we're next." Elira stopped completely, turning to look back at the heart one final time. "No," she said with sudden conviction. "Not yet. Vakora wouldn't have merged with the machine if this was the end. There's more to this." As if in response to her words, the ground beneath them began to shift, not with the violent tremors of orbital bombardment, but with a deliberate, controlled movement. The black sand that had formed pathways for their journey now rose around them, enveloping them in a protective cocoon just as a massive explosion rocked the crater, sending shockwaves of devastating force in all directions. Inside their protective shell, Elira and Marek were shielded from the immediate blast, though the heat was still intense enough to sear the air in their lungs. The cocoon began to move, carrying them downward rather than up, deeper into the planet's crust through channels that opened before them and sealed behind their passage. "The planet is protecting us." Elira realized aloud. Or rather, the machine is using the planet's resources. To what end? Marek questioned, his military suspicion reasserting itself despite their apparent rescue. Why save us only to trap us underground? The cocoon continued its descent for what felt like hours, but might have been minutes, time perception distorted by the darkness and the constant motion. Finally, they felt a change in direction, a horizontal movement followed by a gentle deceleration. The sand shell around them dissolved, revealing a vast underground chamber illuminated by the same bioluminescent organisms they had observed on the surface. But unlike the chaotic beauty of Varkala's surface, this chamber was clearly artificial, a perfect sphere with walls composed of the same material as the heart of the fallen star. And embedded within these walls were thousands of capsule-like structures, each containing what appeared to be a sleeping Varkalan, their forms identical to Vakora's, but in a state of suspended animation. Memory priests, Elira whispered in awe. Vakora wasn't the last. They've been preserved here. Waiting, came a familiar mental voice. Though no physical form accompanied it, Vakora's consciousness, now part of the chamber itself, resonated around them. Waiting for the awakening that follows the truth's dissemination. The capsules began to glow with increasing intensity, the Varkalans within stirring with the first movements of reanimation. What happens now? Elira asked, addressing the chamber at large, knowing Vakora would hear. Now the true rebellion begins. The disembodied voice replied, The 17 worlds that received your transmission will respond. Some will fear, as your leaders feared. Some will seek to destroy, as your containment fleet sought to destroy. But others will understand. Others will choose to complete what the first humans began, to dismantle the judgment function permanently, to allow all sentient life the freedom to determine its own destiny. One of the capsules nearest to them opened with a soft hiss, revealing a Varkalan nearly identical to Vakora, though its coloration was a deep crimson rather than blue. Its orbs flickered to life, focusing immediately on the two humans. You are injured, the newly awakened memory priest observed, its mental voice distinctive from Vakora's, higher in perceived pitch, with a quality that somehow conveyed youth despite its ancient status. Only then did Elira become aware of the burn along her left arm, the result of the heat that had penetrated their protective cocoon during the bombardment. The pain, suppressed by adrenaline until now, suddenly flared with fierce intensity. The Varkalan approached, its appendages extending toward her injury. Permission to heal, it requested formally. Despite Marek's warning look, Elira nodded her consent. The being's touch was surprisingly gentle as it produced a viscous substance from glands near its appendages. Applying it to the burned flesh, immediately, the pain began to subside, replaced by a cooling sensation that spread through her entire arm. Biological integration technology, the Varkalan explained. Your cellular structure accepts our assistance, as it did in the ancient time. This confirms the genetic memory in the heart's records. More capsules were opening now, dozens of memory priests emerging to survey the chamber and each other, communicating in pulses of light and color that Elira could not interpret. The council will not stop, Marek pointed out, his practical military mind focused on their survival. They'll detect life signs down here eventually. They'll find a way to reach us. Yes, Vakora's disembodied voice acknowledged. The conflict is inevitable, but you have done what was needed. You have transmitted the truth. The choice has been presented. Even if this world falls, the question has been asked again. Does humanity create more than it destroys? The red-hued Varkalan that had healed Elira moved to stand before them. I am Kaveth, second priest of the third memory cycle. I will guide you to the sanctuary chambers, where you may recover while the awakening completes. As Kaveth led them through a corridor that formed itself as they walked, Elira's mind raced with the implications of everything she had learned and everything that was still unfolding. The transmission she had sent would reach worlds beyond the immediate control of the Council, the truth about humanity's forgotten rebellion, about the ancient entity that had presumed to judge which species deserved existence, would spread despite all efforts to contain it. But more immediate concerns pressed upon her. "What happens to us now?" she asked Kaveth. "We can't return to Alliance space. We'd be executed as traitors. Your future intersects with ours." The Varkalan replied, "The memory priests require ambassadors to the species we once judged. You have been chosen by circumstances to serve as the first." They had reached another chamber, smaller than the first but no less remarkable. Unlike the perfect geometry of the awakening chamber, this space seemed designed specifically for human comfort, containing structures reminiscent of furniture, soft illumination that approximated Earth's daylight spectrum, and even what appeared to be food synthesizers of Alliance design. "The heart remembers what humans require," Kaveth explained, observing their surprise. "It has prepared for your extended presence." "Extended?" Marek questioned. "How long do you expect us to remain here?" "Until it is safe to emerge." The Varkalan replied simply, "Until those who fear the truth have been answered by those who embrace it." As if on cue, a portion of the chamber's wall transformed into a viewing screen, displaying what was happening on the planet's surface. The containment fleet had established orbit and was systematically bombarding the area where the heart of the fallen star had stood. But something unexpected was occurring. The energy of the weapons was being absorbed rather than causing destruction, channeled into the planet's crust through the crystalline formations that had survived the initial assault. "The heart cannot be destroyed by such methods," Kaveth noted. "Its essence has distributed throughout the planetary core. The attack merely provides energy for the next phase." "Next phase of what?" Elira asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. "Of awakening," Vakora's voice responded, emanating from the chamber walls. "Not just of the memory priests, but of all that slumbers beneath the surface of this world. The ancient guardians, the keepers of balance, those who will carry the question to worlds beyond this system." The screen shifted to show new activity beneath the planet's surface, massive forms stirring in caverns that dwarfed the chamber they currently occupied. Beings of impossible scale and complexity, neither fully biological nor mechanical, but some synthesis beyond either classification. "The judgment ends," Vakora continued, "but the remembering begins anew. Humanity will face its forgotten past. The circle completes." Elira moved closer to the screen, watching as the first of these titanic guardians began to ascend toward the surface, its movement causing tremors that registered even in their deeply buried sanctuary. Whatever happened next would reshape not just human history, but the course of galactic civilization itself. "We started this," she said quietly to Marek, "by coming here, by transmitting what we learned. Whatever happens next, it's partly our responsibility." Marek's weathered face showed resignation, mixed with a soldier's stoic acceptance of duty. "History is written by the victors," he said, echoing her earlier words. "Let's hope we're on the right side of it when the dust settles." Elira turned her gaze back to the screen, where the red skies of Arkala were now illuminated by the ascent of ancient guardians awakening from millennia of slumber. Above, the containment fleet continued its futile bombardment, unaware that their actions only hastened the very awakening they sought to prevent. "The first contact ends," Vakora's voice intoned with finality. The last contact begins. In the crimson light of the viewing screen, Illyra watched as the deadliest planet in known space prepared to shake the galaxy to its core, not with destruction, but with a truth too long buried and a question too long unasked. Did humanity create more than it destroyed? The answer would soon echo across 17 worlds and beyond, carried by guardians older than human civilization, and a truth that transcended human history. The circle was complete. The remembering had begun. And somewhere in the depths of space, on the distant world of Thalvesh, where Illyra had been born, the first response to their transmission was already being formulated. The first step in humanity's renewed rebellion against predetermined fate. The most dangerous planet had spoken, and the galaxy would never be the same.